ways to maintain connection with the people who I've been working with creatively. So we've been doing that through Zoom songwriter groups that meet once a month, which I think has been good for all of us. So I'm curious if there's other people doing that and whether that's been effective. Yeah, great. And of course a number of Zoom folk clubs as well, both in Australia and internationally. And I guess just quickly, in terms of thinking about what's needed for performers, I feel again a little bit uncomfortable talking on behalf of the huge range of performers with different needs. But one thing that I am concerned about is not so much the people like myself who are thoroughly got the music bug and will come back to this when we can, or just keep it going. It's more the people who are at that point, either in the beginning of a career in music, or learning or getting into the music community, who might during this time find other things, move on into other pursuits in life, and we never get the benefit of their becoming part of the folk community and sustaining these traditions. So I guess my main interest is what can be done, particularly to engage young people in folk clubs, and can folk clubs sort of add other strings to their bow that might set up spaces that young people can have their own space, online perhaps, or in small settings, to try to use this time as a way of maintaining or building connections with that part of our community. I guess that's a few minutes, Pam. I don't want to take up all the time, but is that a...
Yeah, no, that's fine, Craig. There is a little bit of time that we can just ask if anyone would like to comment before I hand over to Kimberly to get her perspective from another performer point of view. Would anyone like to just very briefly say anything in response to what Craig's said? Just sort of wave or something. No. No? Okay, that's fine. Yep, Christina. Unmute. Yep.
Oh, I can just what you said about the songwriting circles. A couple of us have found that that's been really fantastic, and it kind of this time of sort of bunkering down, where not much is happening on the outside. We're trying to hone our skills, because the skills are still, we still want to improve, and we can still use our minds even if we can't get out there and play. So a bunch of us have been trying to do just that, just improve our craft and communicate with each other about that, encourage each other, have conversations about music. So yeah, I encourage anyone who's that way inclined to do that.
Great, thanks, Christina. Look, I might hand over to Kimberly now, and so that we can just hear her perspective and how this has affected her, and any thoughts that she might have. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thanks, Pam. And I just want to say, I agree with all the things Craig talked about, and I won't talk about that. I want to talk about a sort of a slightly bigger picture thing, in that our industry has been getting harder over the last few years. We've seen musicians and festivals, their overheads are going up, festivals compliances are going up, the numbers coming through the gate at venues and at festivals is diminishing, and so I think we've come into COVID. From my point of view, I was feeling a little bit down and out before COVID happened, and COVID has been a real kick in the guts, and I applaud the people like Craig and others who've been able to keep that morale up and keep that connection, because not everyone is able to do that. And I think one thing that would really, really change the way people are feeling now is to provide a vision for the future where, we do have a folk scene. Folk music, it is going to be a battle, but this is the same battle that the rest of the music community is going to be facing. And you know, this year I've actually, up to this point, I've been working with Musicians Australia, who have been working with Music Victoria and the Victorian Music Development Office. And there are equivalents, obviously, in New South Wales and around the country, to try and get together and make sure that we do have something to come out with at the end. We're creating action plans to try and lobby government to change the nature of regulation that sits over over our festivals and our gigs, to try and free up our industry and allow us to actually do what we need to do. Because, you know, I have had a lot to do with mountain grass, and just the amount of work that is required that is just so irrelevant to the actual festival is just staggering. But yeah, I just think that overhead is holding our whole genre back. We need, this is a period where our whole industry has just been kind of flattened for the time being. It is an opportunity to look at where we have been and maybe where we want to get to. I'd love to see it as a time where we unite together, we unite with the other groups, our other musical cousins, to save the music scene as well as our own, because we are a small scene and could easily just fall away. But I'd love to see a revitalised scene. You know, I read a lot about the folk revival, where it was a growing scene. I'd love to look at that model, what was going on then, as well, you know, as well as lobbying government. Look at the model of what was going on then, because I know it's certainly in bluegrass we are an ageing demographic as well, and Craig talked about that. We need new blood. We need to become relevant again as well. I just think, yeah, now is the time to do that. And how we do that, I don't have all the answers, and I certainly don't have all the answers in these few minutes, but I'd love to sort of think that we can.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Kimberly. There's certainly a lot of food for thought there. Would anyone like to comment on any of that? Now, I can't. It's really difficult because there's more people than I can actually see on my screen. So I'm hoping I'm not missing out on people, but I'll kind of flick through, and you just have to keep waving at me. No one wants to comment.
Hey, Pam. Kieran Afri here.
Oh, Kieran. Okay, yeah. Please go ahead.
Afri's here as well. Really interesting to hear Kimberly's comments and Craig's. There's a couple of things that we'd like to say. In terms of, I think there are lots of small groups out there that are using technology through this period to enhance what they're doing and you know, stay in their little communities. I think one thing that we should look at is how to let those little bubbles be connected to other people that don't know about those bubbles existing. So as from conversations with you, Pam, you know that there's little bits of trad, you know, Zooms going on, but there's people outside of that just don't know that they're happening. So how can we find a way to let people know they exist, either a database, register them some way, or on our website, you know, where there is this little group, you know, maybe it's thesession.org.
Yeah, and people who are providing you know, Zoom lessons as well. You
Absolutely.
know,
yeah.
There's all this online resource, be it kind of more community gatherings via Zoom that are happening regularly, or actually like people who are proficient in teaching through Zoom, or other online platforms.
Yeah, and I think in response to what Kimberly had said, and it is extremely tough to look at, you know, smaller numbers coming into festivals, and that model, which doesn't seem to be currently sustainable. Maybe it will be again in the future, but right now it's a real struggle, and I feel for people that are trying to put those festivals on. But maybe with the tools that are out there, there are ways that we can enhance our genres, you know, either as a big folk genre or the multiple segments within that, and to get people focusing not just on turning up to a festival and performing, but being part of a community and using Zoom and other technologies that are there to really, I suppose strengthen the ground of that genre and get kids learning, get more at that young level, which well, and as well, like there's guys like Jodie Moran out there that are just, as we were having this discussion, a little Zoom link came in for this evening's 2 tunes that will be a little class of Irish music that he's running weekly. I'm sure he's not the only one doing it. I'd say there's loads of little things going on we just don't know, and it would be great to find a way to reach out, connect them up, and make more happen.
Yeah, and just a follow up to that comment, I suppose, just one of the points made earlier about honing the craft and kind of going deep. I think, if we kind of just flip this and say, well, okay, we're very restricted in terms of performance and the usual ways of gathering, but it is actually an opportunity to go deeper into our own crafts. And I think what I found, I mean, just out of my own sheer kind of lack of anything to do, I've been, learning more tunes and practicing more, playing more, and I talk to people who are the same. I think now, and I was saying to Karen during the week, it strikes me as an opportunity of it's a time of learning and a time of listening. So and listening to, we're so geared towards listening to big bands on stage and groups playing in sessions. We've possibly slightly lost the craft of listening to an individual voice, maybe less so for singers, but I think in the music and in like the traditional Irish music, that thing of listening to that individual voice, or like I say, a duet where it's a very small sound, that maybe now is an opportunity both for us to hone our learning platforms and how we learn and pass on our music, and how we also listen to individuals, not necessarily famous individuals, but just our community of individuals who can share their individual music. So I feel like the online platforms do actually lend themselves to more individual sharing and performance in a way that is not necessarily the same in festivals, where it's, as I say, it's more ensemble based or big band based, but also I think a time for learning music and going back that bit deeper into the individual disciplines. So that's kind of
Okay, so I think there are a few things coming out of this. I mean, I think connecting the bubbles is a great idea, but I think and I think that sort of self-learning and pursuing those is also a great thing. But I also I do think though that there's a wider community out there that we do need to support, because we don't want we don't want the top end to drop off either. So I think it's a big challenge, I think, for us all. And the biggest worry is this sort of disconnect that will occur if we don't, as communities, somehow reach out and connect with each other. Having said that, I want to move on now to Val McGarry. Val is an agent who works a lot with overseas artists, but also with a lot of local artists as well. I've certainly worked a huge amount with Val when I was working with the National Folk Festival. So Val, from an agent's point of view, I'm really interested in what you've got to say now.
Hi everybody. Yes, so Val McGarry from Band-Aid Management. I predominantly tour international folk Celtic bluegrass artists around Australia to all the festivals. I have a few local Australian artists that I work with and manage as well. The whole COVID thing, totally decimated all the tours that I had on the ground at the time that it happened, and then had to cancel another 5 tours that were coming up for the national. And since then, basically, I haven't worked. So from an agent's point of view, the business is decimated for myself in particular, because of my main touring thing is international artists. So I can't see that coming back much before 2022. Maybe at the end of 2021 we might see something, but at this point, when my international artists are contacting me, asking me what's happening, I'm basically saying them just hold off till 2022 until we can get the international travel borders open again. We can't tour anybody here. So And then once again, we're also stuck with the borders being closed in Australia. We can't tour around the country there either. So as from an agent's point of view, there's hardly any work on the ground for an agent at the moment, unless you are looking after local artists in your particular area and can book some smaller gigs for them, and they're happy to run with a smaller gig of no more than 50 people, or a small house concert or something like that. I'm all in for the Zoom thing, the online programming and people doing their thing online, but unfortunately, as an agent point of view, it completely leaves me out in the cold. Nobody needs an agent to book an online gig or anything like that. So I'm sort of hoping that my business does survive at the end of this, and when we all come back together, that we'll have something to tour again. That's the problem. From what I think needs to happen, well, not even necessarily needs to happen, what would be nice to happen, because all the festivals that were cancelled couldn't pay artists and things like that, even though, one festival cancelled on the day that the festival was supposed to start. There might have to be some sort of festival insurance, and I don't know how the festivals would go about getting this or how much it would cost. Probably totally exorbitant and out of the question. But from my point of view, my artists being here from overseas, losing all that money and having to go home with all these expenses, quite a few of the artists lost over $10,000. They were already $10,000 out of pocket, and then didn't get that $10,000 back, and they didn't get whatever else they were going to earn on top of it. It has left a lot of people out of pocket. I just don't know when I'm going to be working in the industry again at this point in time.
Yeah, wow. Amy, I see you're there as well. Do you have any comments you'd like to add? Working as an agent? Just unmute. Can you unmute?
Yes, sorry, I was just having trouble with the chat. Hi. Look, echoing Val, there's not really much we can do at the moment, although I am working on developing my roster, and I just went to a virtual conference this week in London, which was great. It was a lot cheaper than flying over there, so certainly there's lots of conversations with agents over there wanting to collaborate. So I think it's just a case of keeping those conversations going, and I'm still reaching out to people to make those connections. But I do work with international artists at the moment, so I'm kind of pivoting over to leaning into management, and also to developing that domestic roster, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the domestic roster is going to be very important for us in the short term, at least, and particularly in keeping our industry here buoyant, and keeping our support for our performers. I'm going to move on to unless has anyone got, not sure whether anyone's got any comments, but might hold the comments till after we talk to, Erin has a chance to speak. Erin Collins is the artistic director of the Signet Festival in Tassie, and I'll just hand over to her to sort of talk about festivals. And I know there are a few other festival organisers in the room, so to speak. So it's we might hear from you as well, Erin.
Sure. Thanks, Pam, and everyone preceding. It's a pretty sobering time, and I feel for us. I was thinking, dwelling on it this morning. I feel a bit like we've had an Icarus moment, because we had a fantastic 2020 festival this January gone, and the year was looking very buoyant, and we all know what's happened since. We actually made the decision to cancel very early. It was actually in May, and I was just remembering again this morning that we had proposed to put off the announcement until now, so August, September, but for all sorts of reasons we decided to release that information early, predominantly to give people clarity about okay, don't bother organising for this because we can't be sure that we can pull it off. And the whole committee are really comfortable with that decision. Obviously now it's played out that it was the right one to do. We are still looking at whether there's going to be a chance for us to put on a one-day event at a couple of local venues. We looked at the possibility of an outdoor event, but because we have a festival in a town, that would be really hard to manage. So yeah, as I said, that's all up in the air. We're going to make a call on that in the next couple of weeks. But the other thing we're looking at is also working with local venues throughout the year next year. If we can pull in artists from around Australia predominantly, I'm guessing, I don't think international borders will be open till the end of next year at least. So we really want to keep, trying to support artists to get, a little piece of the pie that still exists. I mean, Tasmania, as most of you will probably know, has no COVID cases, and we've had none for nearly a month. So gigs are opening up again in very sort of limited circumstances. The local gypsy jazz sessions up the road from where I live have just opened up again. So there's, it's just eking out. So yeah, we're really hoping that we can extend that. And again, for this one-day event, if we do pull it off, sure, we have a plethora of talent in Tasmania and we could do a beautiful event, but it would also be really lovely if we could bring someone in from, some of the other states around the country. But yeah, that's to be had. So what we're doing in the meantime as well, 2022 happens to be our 40th anniversary as a festival. So we're again engaging musicians to try and, contribute archival stuff and stories of what the festival has been for them over the years. It's a conversation, it's not a job, but, it's keeping we keep coming back to this community that are so valuable to all of us and just trying to keep that conversation in our communities. The other thing that just happened for us in the last 2 weeks is I did manage to get funding through AMCOS for our song and tune competition, and it's substantially increased in prize money. So we're really hoping that some of the professional full-time musicians who are really low on funds at the moment because they don't have day jobs might be able to, obviously it's only going to be 1 or 2, but can pull in and access, some sort of recompense through that once we open up applications. And likewise with our youth comp. Interestingly, the song and tune comp, people have always been really good at putting in interviews online, whereas the kids, are much better at just turning up on the day and logging in. So having said that, they've all been doing Zoom lessons for school, so they might be a lot more computer savvy than they were. Locally, the Mount Roland Festival is going ahead in November. When I say locally, I mean in Tasmania. It's a fair way from where I am. But their numbers they're doing 10 acts and 150 punters. So it's tiny.
Wow.
I don't, they're not going to make any money, but none of us make money. It's about breaking even. So hopefully that will happen. So, as I said, we are kind of feeling secure, but we also still don't have open borders. So things could, totally implode on us once we open our borders. And I think that's the same for every country everywhere. The only other thing is, reiterating what Kimberly was saying, having because we're doing the history project and because, I grew up in Sydney, so, we used to sing at Packed Folk in those old days. And there is a great history in folk music. I don't think it's gone. I think, from the few forums I've attended remotely in this time and the enthusiasm I still see around, I don't think we're going to lose this community, but I do think we have to work at keeping engaged and building on what we have. And as I think that's me really. So if anyone's got any ideas, I'm really open to doing anything, during 2021 to keep music alive and not, we won't have a festival that's called a festival, but if anything's remotely possible, we really, really, really want to support it.
Yep. Okay. Look, thanks there. And I know that there are a number of other festival organisers. I did see Zena's hand up at one point. I'm not sure whether Zena wants to talk now or whether you want to save it till later. Zena, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Pam. I was just interested in the festival that's going ahead in November in Tasmania. How are they paying their performers with only 150 people?
Yeah.
How are they covering their costs?
They are only local performers, so there's no travel cost, well, apart from a bit of petrol money. So it's a pretty low fee. I do know what they're paying because I was asked to perform, and one of the band members that I currently work with didn't feel his health was up to going to a festival, you know, in a very isolated area. So yeah, it's literally in the, you know, couple of $100 per performer. So it's not a lot of money. It's more that people are willing to get out, have a chance to play, have a chance to bring that community. So no, they're not putting a lot of money at stake. And I don't know if they've got any funding. I suspect it's a new festival because they had their first year last year. I suspect they may have managed to get some of the COVID recovery funding. So yeah, but it is just a very, very low key local event.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Erin. Just on festival organisers. I've just noticed Val Caulfield from South Australia is in the room. Val, do you have anything you want to add for your festival? I know we did have a bit of an email conversation about what you were up to.
Yes, well, we decided to cancel our 3-day event festival, and I negotiated with our funding body that we would put on 3 separate events throughout the financial year, which they came to, so we've still actually got our funding. On the Saturday of our normal 3-day weekend, we're just doing we called it Arvo on the Oval, and we're just saying Fleurieu Folk Festival presents Arvo on the Oval. So we've got all South Australian artists. We've got 5 performers, and it's going from 2 o'clock till 7 o'clock. Probably the biggest thing that we've got rid of is alcohol. So that makes our COVID stuff go from a management plan just down to a safe plan. And of course we'll have security and professional cleaners, and so far so good. We've got it all happening. And the artists that we've got on board have been really supportive. So we've just worked for a win-win situation and break even. So that's where we're up to.
Right. Brian, did you want to say something? Just very briefly.
It was just a very brief suggestion to Erin. Like, would you consider a hybrid festival, like do what you're doing, but live stream it to us here and everywhere around us, or anywhere really, which would give it quite a bit of extra money, because the Sydney Folk Fest online was very, very good. I enjoyed it, and I think the audience got something out of it, and so like a hybrid, I think, is a model that'll work, and we can enjoy it and get some extra funds.
Yeah, look, to be honest, it's not a conversation we'd had. We did can the idea of doing a fully online festival quite early on, predominantly because we're in summer, and we figured a lot of people would probably prefer to be outside by then. But I think it's a lovely idea, and our new database coordinator has just moved down here from Victoria after a couple of weeks quarantine in Devonport near the ferry. Yeah, so look, no, it's not something we've really explored, and I guess it basically depends if we have enough people who have the technical ability to pull it off. But if that were something that could, yeah, it's a great idea. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, look, I just on the Sydney Folk Festival idea, it was very successful, but we didn't make money. All the money went to the performers, and if we'd had if we hadn't had the money to be able to support the tech side of it, and we had to sort of build that into the costs, obviously then the performers are going to get less. It's a very tricky balance. And I did have a conversation with Chloe Goodyear, who obviously, you know, Woodford had a series of online stream concerts when this all happened, which was great to support the artists, but they were relying on donations, and basically the advice I got was try not to rely on the donations, because you get massive streaming of people just having it for free, and the donations weren't really commensurate with the number of with the streaming they had. So it's interesting. I don't think it's impossible, but I think there's a fine balance, and there's certainly an opportunity for doing hybrid events. But I think you've got to plan it out. Anyway, look, I don't want to sort of drag this on, and I really want to move on to our next guests. And basically, we've invited the FAA to speak about what they feel their role in all of this is and where they might be going. We do have two representatives from the FAA in the room today. I think it's possibly John Preston John. That's a hybrid, isn't it? It's Keith Preston who's going to. Sorry, John. Keith Preston who's possibly going to talk, but maybe both of them are going to say something. So I'm going to hand over to the FAA. So just unmute, guys. Thanks, Keith.
That's good. Hi, Pam. Thanks for organising. It's a good opportunity for us to hear what's going on. Just for some people may be involved with Folk Alliance, some people may not. So just I want to try. It's good to paint a little bit of a background, because Folk Alliance has been going since 1998, and it's had different roles in that time, and it's had changes of emphasis. For the last number of years, we've been, in a sense, doing a couple of things, running some projects, but also we don't get funding, so that we have financed ourselves largely through the insurance program, or I guess the bespoke sort of insurance for folk performers and for small festivals. That and membership is where we get our income stream from. One of the struggles, I think, with Folk Alliance has been, since it started, has been how to operate to try to get itself to have a coordinator or someone working. So this has been, at the beginning we've had a coordinator. There's been a few times when we've had a paid coordinator when there was some funding. We were operating through, when I first got involved, Folk Alliance was just about broke, and we got a little bit of money, put the coordinator together. This is going back a little bit, and then in a sense we lost that money through paying a coordinator, through having someone. So we go backwards, and we've had a coordination, but I'm just saying it's the last couple of years, essentially we haven't had a coordinator. So the coordination of our projects has stayed the same, but it's been run by our committee. So that, in a sense, we have an executive committee. The projects that we've been involved with, apart from the membership and insurance side of things, has been the youth, or the National Youth Awards, which we run at the National Folk Festival, which then links into the main folk festivals, which is featuring Youth Artist of the Year travelling around nationally to the main folk festival, but also going across to showcase at Folk Alliance International in America or Canada. So that has been one of the main youth projects that we've been doing. For the last 4 years, we've had a small folk grant scheme that we have run. So over the last 4 years, we've given out nearly $50,000 in funding to small. We funded 4 or 5 projects for the last 4 or 5 years. The first year we ran that was in 2016. We gave 4 grants out, but we had 60 applications. So it's actually, when you look at it, it was quite disappointing from our end, is that we were only able to fund. There's so many great ideas and projects that people are involved in. And there were 60 applications. We've been able to fund only 4. We have, this year, we were developing 2 new projects which have been affected by COVID. One was the release of a touring directory, a folk directory, largely for artists, but it would be a list of festivals, venues and presenters. And of course, a lot of these are, you know, we haven't released that because the whole scenario has changed. The other thing that we would have delivered in August, which is last month, was a folk music round table, which was basically a one-day conference for the folk industry. So that was again cancelled in March. That was so those are the projects that we've been working on. I will say, I mean, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that essentially as soon as COVID came in, our income stream vanished. People stopped getting insurances and they stopped getting memberships. So really come at the end of March, our income basically stopped. And we've only just started to get memberships and insurances at a very small level coming back in. I guess the good news is that over this last 5 or 6 year period, we put ourselves into a much better financial position than we were 6 or 7 or 8, 10 years ago, in the sense that we, especially and as people like John, I guess, and myself, who've worked to keep the program going, but also ensure that Folk Alliance is viable financially. And so we made a decision in March when COVID came in, basically to shut down our program and our expenditure. We normally get together. We have people in different states. We get together twice a year for planning meetings. We would do the small grants. We do the youth development program. We do the Folk Alliance International. All of those, we said, well, we're stopping until we know what's going on. As it turns out, which means that we've got, in a sense, our money in the bank, which is sitting there, which allows us to be able to sort of embark on getting Folk Alliance up and running again very easily. But we saw it was very hard in March to say what is going to happen. There was a huge amount of noise from the music industry and the arts industry. And I think it's obviously shown us, in a sense, the limitations that we have. We're very, as an industry, we're not very well organised. We are.
Sorry, Keith. I was just wondering, how do you see the role of Folk Federation as sort of helping support that industry by, being at the forefront of any lobbying that might happen? Or
we made some submissions. We made submissions to Federal Arts and also to the Australia Council when essentially I guess the first discussions were happening about the impact on the arts industry. I think our voice is very small. Probably the voice that people are listening to in the folk industry are the large festivals, the Port Fairies and the Woodfords, and maybe the National Folk Festival. They tend to listen to it for that. It's all been about economics, and it's been about the viability of festivals and also about the impact on artists. Yeah. So I think we have submitted an application to the Australia Council to host another folk industry roundtable for the middle of next year, which can be a place where we all come together. Yeah. Because by then, I think we'll be able to travel, we'll be able to talk. A lot can be done on Zoom before that, identifying. But as a lot of, as everyone's been talking about, we're talking about, in a sense, the recovery of our sector. All the different aspects of the music and arts industry are assessing the damage to their audience, to their branding, to their funding, their income streams, and this kind of thing. There is a very real possibility that a lot of festivals won't recover straight away. That it might be a case of, one step forward, 2 steps back. People are not going. There's going to be risk involved in re-establishing festivals. So I think the folk industry is, we're only really now getting a picture of what it's going to be like. But as you know, as Erin has said, as Val said, you know, we're talking a long-term picture. What we do now is different to what we might be doing in a year's time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I think that whatever comes back is going to come back in a very different way. We're going to learn a lot from what we've been through, and we're probably going to use that. Look, in terms of, you know, looking at the, I'll come to you in a minute, Kate. Yep. In terms of looking at the big festivals, that's one thing. But you think of, if you think of all the small festivals that are on around the country, and there are a lot of them. I mean, up until COVID hit, you know, even though maybe the attendance wasn't as big, although some festivals are telling me that their attendance has never been better. Those festivals are happening all around the country. Now, a lot of them are organised by volunteer committees or volunteer organisations. They bring huge economic benefit into each of those small towns. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to really need to focus on, that it's not just big festivals in one or two places, because we don't have a lot of big festivals in this country. We probably have 4 or 5 big folk festivals, but there are all the tiny weeny little ones that are huge economic benefits, and without that economic input, those communities are really the poorer. So, you know, it's, in some respects, we do have to focus a little on everything, not just looking at the and basically seeing if we can hone in on those smaller festivals. Kate, you had something you wanted to say, so I'll hand over to you.
I do, and thank you.
Can you turn up your volume a little bit, Kate?
Okay, can you hear me better now if I'm closer?
Yep, that's better.
Okay. First of all, a massive thank you to everyone who works in the folk scene and who's supported musicians over the years. Like, it's an enormous thing, and a lot of it's volunteer contribution. And, you know, we've seen as musicians, festivals trying to change the model a bit in recent years too. And I just, you know, in thinking about roundtables that are coming up, I feel like it's important to mention that before COVID hit, the existing model probably needed a bit of a look at for musicians. For a lot of, like, I'd say for most musicians I know, the model of the music industry doesn't feel sustainable as a lifestyle choice. It's something that increasingly gets pushed into the realm of hobby, because the stresses and mental health issues involved with trying to run music business can be quite prohibitive. It's a good thing to recognise in the time that we're in, where things have suddenly quickly changed. I guess what I'd love to suggest is that instead of trying to think about getting back to the old model, like, that we could use this time to really address some of the issues that were inherent in the old model, and try to think of ways that we can make that work better in the future, regardless of what the COVID situation brings us. A bit of kind of reverse problem solving, good community engagement with musicians about, you know, what the reality of being in the folk scene as a musician is. And, you know, out of something like that, if we could use the time that we have to, you know, yeah, not just try and patch up and get back to where we were, but to actually create something better. I feel like as folk festival leaders and as leaders in the music community, creating a collective vision that keeps that in mind is something that would be fantastic.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Kate. That's really interesting and I think very worthwhile. Keith, I'll just come back to you if you wanted to just finish off with the FAA, because we're sort of going to, I think we're going to run a little bit over time, but we're not doing too badly. But I'll just let you finish up.
Yeah, well, look, there's a couple of things I would mention is that, I mean, we as an organisation have limited resources, and we do, for us to be able to do something, I mean, as I said, we have some financial assets, but at the moment we have no cash flow until things start up again and people become members or take out their insurance through us. We may, through this period, be able to access some funding, but again, if we do that, we'll probably need people to get behind us as an industry and say, yes, this is something we need. It has been very frustrating, I think, for Folk Alliance. One of the things that we have tried to do over the years, different people, not just our current committee, but is to try to have an annual conference where we do build that profile of ourselves in the music industry. We're very different than other parts of the music industry, as Pam said. It's not just about professional performers, but it's about the festival organisers, it's about the volunteers, it's about the communities that make up. But it's also we're very much a demographic, and our demographic is that, I won't say it's the old folk scene. We come out of the old folk scene, which is very Anglo-Celtic, and it's very much a demographic. We haven't made a lot of bridges with other parts of the music industry or areas of multicultural Australia. So those are structural weaknesses for us. I think there are things that we can do as Folk Alliance. The good thing, I think, as I said, the good news is we have, despite all of this, got an organisation that can pick up and do things. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we've got an AGM on the 20th of September. So there will be a few more people coming on board. So we would love to see some, as we said, some younger people come into Folk Alliance to help, as Kate said, maybe shape some visions for the recovery of Folk Alliance. So that's an opportunity for you. We're trying to think strategically. If we are going to do something, we want it to be effective. We want it to be something that I think the folk industry buys into. If we said, for example, we could have a marketing campaign. We could have a marketing campaign that just markets the uniqueness of folk festivals, and it's done at a national level.
Yeah.
That could be a strategy that supports, in a sense, everyone, and supports our profile, supports the festival organisers, but also the performers. That, for example, is just one idea, but
yeah,
we'll only be able to do 2 or 3 things. So we have to pick up and sort of say, what are those 2 or 3 things that we're going to do?
So what I guess we suggest, Keith, is that if people really are keen, that they contact you and be part of the Folk Alliance, come to the annual general meeting.
Come and just talk to us.
Yeah.
With us. Yeah.
I am going to have to move on because I'm mindful that I can run this for as long as we need, but obviously people might have to go. Amy, did you want to just make a quick comment, because I wanted to move on to our next speaker shortly?
Yeah. I just wanted to say I think a national folk conference sounds amazing. And on that note, I think just wanted to touch base on what Kim and Kate have said just regarding this, folk revival. And I think it's really important for the folk scene to no longer coexist with the music industry. We need to infiltrate and get into all the other events that are happening and really connect those bubbles. And in that, Big Sound is free this year and it's virtual, and I think we should all slam them with folkies, and Absolutely. We need to get in there and be heard.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Amy. That's fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Ruth Hazelden now, who is going to speak on some slightly different aspects of our folk community, I believe. Ruth, over to you.
Thanks, Pam. For those of you who don't know me, by the way, or why I'm contributing to this, I've been a performer for 25 years. In the folk scene, I worked for, I think, 7 or 8 years as an international touring agent with Across the Borders, with John McCausland there at the Brunswick Music Festival. And I've also done a lot of advocacy work in the last 5 years. And part of that includes as a leader member of Musicians Australia, the new Australian Union, where we've been we're talking at the moment about our space in Australian music and in Australian culture. And I really want to look at this from a helicopter view of what we have and where we're going. And I also want to acknowledge another fellow member here, along with Kim, is Adam Simmons, who's in the room today, who's very much into the world and cultural music scene and also jazz. So we've been talking a lot about the same problems that are occurring throughout these scenes of smaller niche kind of music markets and where we're going, and we're all facing the same thing. And I think this is kind of easier for me to say in a position of being stuck here in Melbourne and Wurundjeri land in stage 4 lockdown. There is no get up and go. We've got time on our hands. This is going to take a while. Common sense says I think we need to take that time. And I do agree with Kate and Amy and Kim, particularly when we say this is the moment that we actually have. And we're taking this opportunity in the union too, to really look at what we are, how the ecosystems, for want of a less bureaucratic term, are working for all of us, and what is the way forward. And there are some pretty big elephants in the room. And I think part of some of those Kate's already addressed. Performers at the moment across the board, particularly those who identify as semi-professionals, and I don't think there is actually really such a thing as more than a handful of full-time professional performers in our scene. Most people have to rely on an income. I think there was a recent survey that said 70% of independent musicians in Australia rely on another source of income. And often that is within the music sector. And I can say there's a member of my band who had 5 sources of income prior to COVID and now has none, because all of that was within the music sector. And I think one of the big elephants in the room here is how we're juggling this conversation around culture, industry, money, conditions for performers, all of those things. And I do think we can find solutions to these without damaging what we have culturally or as a community or as a group. And I slightly disagree with Keith. I think now is the perfect time to actually be talking about this stuff. And there is actually a lot that we can do that doesn't require funding. And I think part of the problem at the moment is, you know, we had this great moment in our union meeting the other night where Paul Davies, who's the new head of music, sort of said to us all, look, does anyone here actually think that Paul Fletcher cares? And there was a resounding no. We are in a situation where our government doesn't, frankly, value culture. But I mean, on the upside, we have just had a release, a report come out of the Australia Council this week, and there was a line in it that actually made me want to cry, because for 25 years I've been applying for grants, knowing that I can't use the word folk to get funding, right? And so, sorry, I'm raving. There's this line here that a recent Australia Council survey showed that entertainment, social connection, and understanding of other perspectives and cultures were the main drivers of arts attendance in Australia in the last financial year. Now, when has anyone ever heard that come out of the Australia Council? We know that in the last few days, the funding from the federal government and the model has come through. It looks like an absolute crock of shite, to put it nicely. Nobody knows how it's going to be administered, but there's no way we're going to get our hands on any of this unless we speak up. And interestingly, in our union meeting the other night, we also had a representative from the Live Music Office, John Wardle, who's incredibly knowledgeable and working with roots music organisations as much as he's working with APRA, AMCOS and the bigwigs. And it's great to have conversations with people like him so that we can get a better idea of where we are in this kind of ecosystem. And he was saying that it is such a great shame that the music industry and the cultural industries in Australia have basically ended up in the situation that we're in, not because of COVID, but it's been greatly, it's been enhanced so much. We've got so many concerns on our plates at the moment, because music tends to be a bit flippy floppy. We're not organised. We have never really engaged in government. So I think this is what we should be doing now. No one has to listen to me, of course, but thank you for letting me rave. But there are three things that I identified that could help us going forward. And this is an idea that I think Bill Horrocks, I remember 20 years ago when I was actually, I think at some stage I was the secretary of Folk Alliance Australia in my youth. But even then we were talking about the importance of an audit, a nationwide audit of demographics of our scene, of the tourist dollar, the community impact, the cultures that are involved, performance, how many people are employed, how many people are volunteer. Volunteers are an absolutely fundamental part of how we exist. With that kind of information, we would be able to go as a body of people to the federal government and say, hey, actually, like in Canada, like so many other countries around the world, their governments recognise the cultural value of what their things are doing. And it's not asking for commercial support. What we're asking for is cultural support. I would like to flag that as an idea, as something. It would take money, probably, I don't know, $20,000, $25,000 to get it done by a reputable company. I would like to see us having some of these difficult conversations by topic on the forum like this. I would like to continue these conversations. I know that I can stand here and be an advocate for performers, but I also know that performers, and we do take this very seriously in the union, that we are developing our own code of conduct. There are things that we as performers need to know about how you guys are operating, particularly for the smaller festivals, so that we can base our needs and negotiate around that sort of thing. And obviously, you know, we logged in here and everyone's having trouble with festival databases at the moment. There's obvious community conversation that needs to continue. For no other reason than seeing that we needed it, I started that forum on Facebook, and I again want to encourage anyone to use that for any possible reason you need. I don't really want to own it in any way, it's ours, but if at this time we can use it to start discussions, please do, please jump on there and be a part of that. The last thing quickly I'll rave about is the fact that a parliamentary inquiry was announced last week. And again, it's a question that I've never seen come up by government, and quite frankly, we're all wondering if there's been some kind of divine intervention that has asked this question, because we can't see how it could have possibly come from a Liberal government. But one of the terms of reference is they're asking people to identify the non-economic benefits that enhance community, social well-being and promoting Australia's national identity, how to recognise, measure and grow them. So that's one of 4 things that they're asking people to speak to. There's a survey that I would love it if festivals, venues would circulate that survey on their social media. But more importantly is making a submission. Making a submission can be a 20-page document, but it can also be like a personal letter. And the government, and most of you probably know this, some of you may not, it can be just a letter about your personal experiences of folk, how it has impacted you, and how it impacts culture. I am happy to do, I've written quite a number of these, and I've appeared in 2 parliamentary inquiries as well around independent music, and I'm more than happy to help anybody who would like to word something like that. But I think this is, like Amy was saying, it's not infiltrating, yes it is infiltrating, it's inviting ourselves to the conversation, I think, and taking ourselves seriously. And we can start those conversations now, and with people like Adam across genres, I think we've got, we can turn this into a much stronger way out of COVID and get ourselves through this crisis. Just the last thing, Christina Mamucci and I were talking about it, and I can see Helen Begley here, all these amazing people with skills. We're thinking of starting a national folk choir online. And if anyone wants to flag ideas of this sort that would engage your festivals community or your immediate community, let's have a think of some of those things, because I think now that we're all realising that we're kind of stuck in this slightly long term, it's the people who come to festivals and are, you know, not performery people like me, but really just like Kieran and Afric were talking before too, about just community involvement. Let's keep thinking on how we can do that. Anyway, I'll stop my rave now.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Well spoken. We are kind of running out of time, but I think it's been so engaging, and I think we're learning a lot, and we're learning that we have a lot of different little strings to what the folk community and the folk sector really involves, and it's complicated. I'm going to hand over now to Zena Armstrong from Cobargo, also bushfire champion of the area down there, who seems to have her head around so many different things at the moment. But anyway, Zena, over to you, please. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Unmute. Just
yeah. Thanks very much, Pam, and thanks for a really interesting and engaging conversation. Ruth and Kate, I think, said a couple of things that really resonated with me. One, Ruth, you said that we have to take ourselves seriously, and I absolutely agree. I think we possibly underestimate a number of things about what it is that we do as a community. Quite apart from the amazing skills that people bring to run festivals, there is artistic excellence, there is creative originality, there is a unique voice, and we do tell stories of Australia that nobody else is telling. And I feel one of the things that I found when I first came to the Cobargo Folk Festival was that people just did all this stuff, and it was kind of like, not that it wasn't valued, but the actual, we kind of didn't realize. We didn't realize what we actually had and what we were producing and where it sat in the cultural scene in Australia. And so we kind of constantly underestimated ourselves. And that, when Kate talks about let's try and look at how we might do something different, I think it is possibly all about really grabbing hold of what we have, recognizing what we have, and taking it really, really seriously, and seeing ourselves as making a really important contribution to Australian cultural life. Now, if we do that, then we need to think about how do we convey all of that to everybody else? How do we promote it? What are the vehicles that we have in order to be able to tell that story, not just nationally in Australia, but out there in the world? One of the things I think that we found with Cobargo is if you just stand up, you get your narrative right, you work out exactly what it is, you stand out, and everyone stands up and you just talk about that narrative to everybody. This is who we are. This is what we're doing. This is why you have to take us seriously. We are serious people. We are doing serious stuff. We are doing good stuff. And somehow I think as a community, we need to come together to find ways in which we can actually tell this story of the value that we bring to contemporary Australia. We need to tell it to governments, we need to tell it to business, we need to tell it to other cultural organisations, we need to tell it overseas. Ray Martin has been down here. He's doing a documentary for Channel 9 about recovery in the Bega Valley. And Kate and the New Gracers and myself were lucky enough to be with him last night. And he was telling a story, I think, of what I think he is talking about the eroding that is happening of the community story in Australia, where it's not just the folk scene where this erosion is happening, where this diminishment of our status is happening, but it's happening in communities all over Australia. The community voice is no longer being championed, it's no longer being heard. There is nowhere. There's not the ABC, regional newspapers are all being killed off, regional television stations are all being killed off. The community story is being lost in Australia. And that's because of monopolies like the Murdoch media, governments that don't value this. It's something, I think, that we are one community in a community of communities. As somebody in a bushfire community, trying to tell the story of what it means to be in a bushfire community and how we need to recover what we need to recover, the support we need to recover. We're linking up with all sorts of other communities across Australia who are finding that we desperately need to find a way to have a voice here. Now, what that might mean for us, I don't know. I mean, we've been talking about this television channel. We've been talking about radio. We don't have a folk alley. We don't have a bluegrass situation. Maybe we actually need to be doing those sorts of things, coming together and just saying, hey, you guys, fuck you. We're here. This is what we do. You take notice and be feisty and, you know, just kind of get out there and get on the drum again. I don't know how I did that, but once you start making your point in a really firm manner, people come to you and they start saying, oh, Ruth Hazelton, she's got something to say. And I reckon we all just have to get up there and say it from the heart. But we kind of need to work out what our narrative is. What is it? What are we doing? And it's more, the thing that has really concerned me running the Cobargo Folk Festival, the number of people who say, why do you call it folk? Why don't you just call it a music festival? And you've had that too, Pam, I'm sure. And the answer to that is because we are folk. This is something we're really proud of. And I don't want to be just another music festival. And it's all those things. It's the music, it's the volunteers, it's the community, it's the education. Now, the other thing I'm really concerned about with folk festivals, the volunteer base. We can't do these festivals without a really strong and committed volunteer base. And I am kind of really a little bit concerned that if we're not reaching out, not just to the musos, but also to that whole body of volunteers that keep us all afloat, then it's going to be quite difficult to come back. So Cobargo. Sometimes I feel like we're all Australia, but Cobargo is doing this thing where we're really trying to reach out to our volunteers and just hold them so that when we're ready to go again, they're all there. And I really get you, Kate. I mean, I know that it's really hard for musicians, but let me tell you, it's damned hard being a volunteer community festival organizer as well, with community festival organizers who are all doing it on a volunteer basis. It's really, every now and again, I think, and in Cobargo in particularly, where we're just really fucked, but we all think, oh my God, how are we going to do this? And then something like this happens when you suddenly realize, yeah, we've got a reason to be doing this. It's all you people. And then we think, oh yeah, maybe we can do this. Maybe we can. Anyway, that's my rave. I just think we've got to stand up and be proud and do what we do and infiltrate.
Yeah, I agree. Zena. We are folk. We need to know what we do. We need to know who we are, and we just need to do it well. And that's probably something that we haven't done as well as we could. And maybe it is what we need to be focusing on as a major project for our sector. I'm just going to flick through in case there's anyone that would like to, Kimberly, did you want to say something? Or are you just
yep. Sorry, I was just flicking through the chat rather than putting my hand up.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying, because I'm mindful that, did you want to say something, Amy's partner?
It's Nige. Sorry, I haven't got my own screen.
No, that's okay.
I've just been thinking about everything that people are saying, and I've been to a few conferences in the last 18 months with Amy, Folk Alliance twice, and to Folk Music Ontario. Something that's really clear when you go to these conferences in North America is the vast demographics involved in folk music. There's a lot of young people that attend these conferences, a lot of people playing it. I can't speak for lots of the festivals because I haven't been to lots of festivals overseas yet, but it just seems there is a broader spectrum of demographics being involved in folk music. Something that Amy was talking about before about big sound and all this coexistence with the rest of the music industry. Something that's going to be perhaps a real opportunity for us coming through all of this is figuring out how to appeal to younger audiences, because being a school teacher, I've noticed young people like folk music. They just don't know what it's called. They don't realise what it is. And folk to me is as much as a state of mind as it is a genre. It's not so much a genre to me. It's about stories and narratives and combining all these things together. So I just wanted to raise the point that consumer confidence is going to be coming down out of all of this, particularly with the demographics that attend folk festivals, older get demographics. A key part to all of this for me will be getting younger audiences into it and interested in listening.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's interesting, but when you look at the demographic from surveys for people who attend folk festivals, and it tends to be an older demographic. And I was doing some comparison recently with just the National Folk Festival, and I looked at when it first moved to the ACT, and the big demographic was the sort of 35 to 45 demographic, and then in recent years, you can see that that demographic has just sort of moved to an older demographic, and that's the main demographic. So it's kind of, there's kind of a core of people who keep supporting, and they're going to drop off. You know, some of us are getting a bit old, and so yeah, we do need to look at that engagement of younger people. And you're right, people love folk music. It's just that you've got to let them know what it is, but they've got to discover that for themselves. I think you can't just sort of shove it down their throats and say this is folk, you'll like it. There's just so many challenges. Look, I thank you all for attending. Chloe, you want to say yes, please?
Thank you. Just thinking about all the knowledge and all those musicians who are sitting out there in their homes, and I know lots of you are working on projects and playing your own music, but this is a chance to put the knowledge out there. Everyone is sitting on so much information. There's all the amazing history and knowledge behind the theme presentations you've done, behind the music that you've played, and all of this could be shared. Now you could share this for adult players, you could have a festival of workshops, you could have a series of theme presentations tying in with artists from all over the world. But you could also, and I say this as someone who's recently started homeschooling, there is an opportunity there for YouTube clips that talk about a song, talk about anything that you can tie into music and kids, folklore and kids. If you look on their ABC Education site at the moment, there are some amazing clips there from Bruce Pascoe. We could be having the same sort of information put out there about our folk scene, about our folk community, and about the things we think about and the things we do. And it's a way to plant the little seeds in the minds of the youth there with kids who have times on their hands. So, you know, kids who might pick up an instrument. So.
And look, if I can add, online stuff isn't that hard to get together. I guess it's just a focal point. So, and we're all pretty handy these days. That's what musicians are good for. We make our own websites and we make our own content these days too. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Go into the folk forum and see who's interested. Maybe we can get a collaborative effort happening there.
Yeah.
Could I say something? I just wanted to raise one thing. I love what Ruth and Zena, most people have said. I'll just mention one small thing, then I'll say what I want to say. But the tourist, you mentioned the tourist, you know, the value of attracting tourists. So when I was helping with the Sydney Folk Festival, the first one, Create New South Wales were very interested in that. And I think festivals like the Sydney Folk Festival and of course the National have the potential for that. But what I would like to just add, has anyone thought recently about higher education? You know, I know sounds like a big and difficult thing to organize, but has anyone thought about a faculty, a university accredited folk music faculty? Because I think that could bring things together, especially with involving youth, and it could certainly create a voice. And we've certainly got some very some people who could teach in that.
Yeah. Look, Brian, I think that we certainly did discuss education in the last forum that we had, and there was a lot of, and I think the potential for coming through education is great, but I do think that we have some more pressing problems, and I think one of those pressing problems is actually to be a united voice, because I can't see how, without being a united voice, how we'll be able to sort of further a lot of what we're trying to do. Erin, did you have some things you would like to say?
Well, just quickly on that particular subject, and just back going, thank you to everyone who's contributed to some great discussions coming up. But what do the schools chorus every year? And I believe they're doing that online this year. I mean, I think you're right, Pam. We don't want to all try and do everything. If we have some sort of knowledge base on what other institutions in our field are doing, we can just promote those and make sure they're heard in a broader audience.
Yeah, look, I think one of the problems, well, not problems, it's a good thing, but it's also something that sometimes comes against us, is that we are a lot of little communities, often out there doing our own thing and you know, doing something within our own area. And yet we're not always connecting with that bigger picture. And I think when I look, I'm not sort of using this as a model or anything, but when I do look at some of the things that are going on in other countries, you know, Canada's one, the UK even, you know, and the UK does have courses and academic courses in folk music. There's been a lot more cohesion with their folk scene, and maybe it's easier because it's a sort of smaller, more compact, you know, country, bigger population. I don't know, but I do think that I think that possibly for me anyway, the one thing that's come out of today is that we do need to have a single voice. And I think what Dina was saying about messaging is that the messaging needs to be consistent. If we've got, you know, 10 people giving, you know, they could be 10 great messages, but if they're all different, it's basically dividing what our community is trying to say. So I think, you know, Kate? And
very, very quickly, you know, one of the things when you're trying to do very large problem solving like we're trying to do, I think a really important thing to do is to rethink, you know, try and get rid of all your assumptions. Like, what's important? Why? You know, why do we care about it? What is folk music? What is our common purpose? Where's it all coming from? And for me, I know that coming out of this conversation, I'm suddenly going, I really need to think about that. You know, we have a lot of assumptions about why we do what we do, but we need to be able to articulate those really clearly to make a difference.
Yeah.
So,
Tina?
Yeah, one of the things that I was involved in way back in the day was a major cultural program where we sent a lot of artists overseas. And there was around about $4 million, I think, for that kind of international touring and getting artists export ready. Now, I believe that there are still programs and Austrade run things to get artists export ready, but we in the folk scene possibly don't key into them as much as maybe other people do. I think that we, as Kate said, to sit down and really think about what's important for us and to step through the sorts of things that maybe musicians need for professional development and artistic development, and what do festivals, you know, what's the role of festivals, would be a very good thing. So I actually think we're possibly talking about some kind of strategic development here, and it may be useful to get everybody together in maybe another Zoom meeting, but with somebody who can help us step through some of those things and maybe see if there's some funding available to do that kind of work. Because I think we all now have a really good idea of the range of issues that we're all confronting, and perhaps the next step is to develop a strategic plan. Difficult as that may be for folkies, but
no. Okay. Look, I think there's a couple of really important core things that have come out of today. Adam, sorry, I nearly missed you down the bottom there.
If you don't mind me butting in from the slightly world experimental jazz kind of side of things.
Not at all.
That learnt a whole bunch of Aussie folk songs from my dad when I was young. So that's all part of it. Thanks. It's nice to see this. I'd just like to offer some reflections, comments on what I've been hearing, listening to let you know that the same kind of things are issues in other sectors, other genres. So that notion of actually looking outside is absolutely vital. I'm feeling that in the jazz scene in particular, there are a number of things that resonate. And just that there is a need within the scene to work out, well, what is it that connects? In the jazz scene, it's totally the same thing of different strands, different levels of pro to semi-pro to amateur. There's very, very similar things going on. And within the sector, there can be quite division. But as soon as you get outside of that, everybody goes, oh, that's just jazz. And it's the same with folk. It's, oh, that's what folk is. It's over there. So being united within the sector is really vital. Being aware and, totally celebrate the diversity within the scene, but know that outside the scene, everyone's just placed it over there. And if you're not actually getting to the table, then they don't care. So uniting, but there is absolutely a place for folk music and all the various genres within Australia that are not part of what they call contemporary music, because there is this, I've got this ongoing discussion, I'll call it, with Creative Victoria around what contemporary music means and what it includes or doesn't include. And I know that there is folk music that is written today, there is jazz music, there is world music that's written today that is contemporary, and that there's this crossover. I think it's really vital if we just, as long as we become part of what is considered contemporary, then that opens us up to the funding that is currently off limits to us, because they don't necessarily see how, well, it's not contemporary, meaning rock, pop, mainstream music, and they kind of also connect that to industry. Whereas what we are doing, all these niche festivals happen very often in regional centres. We really are. All of these niche festivals help drive economic activity in terms of tourism, in terms of regional industry, business, hospitality, travel, and that helps when you've done these little small festivals in a small little town that might have just been to a small audience. That helps those metropolitan musicians go, well, I played at this festival, and they go, oh wow, you played at the festival. Like, it all kind of feeds backwards and forwards, and we are an industry. What we bring as musicians, as festivals, as agents, as teachers, we're all bringing something of value to the broader economy. And what's been kind of revealed with COVID, pulling away the curtain, if you like, is the straw sticks that's holding everything up. And so we need to try and help explain and be part of the conversations, and that by getting support for what we do, we'll be able to actually help the government and local communities and larger picture recover, the other sectors. So it's this whole of ecosystem again that Ruth mentioned, it's all interrelated, and we just have to try and help encourage people to understand where we all fit in. And that will, so thank you.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was looking through all the grants and all the people, all the organisations that support various strands of music, and it's all about contemporary music. And of course, folk is contemporary. It's informed by tradition, and it's influenced by tradition and whatever. But it is contemporary because it's what we're doing now. Anyway, look, I think we're probably coming to the end of what I'm just going to flick through and make sure that there's not anybody else waving a hand at me. What I'll do is I'll make this available online. I've recorded this, so if you've got any, I'll send out an email with the chat. There's some very interesting chat that's come out of this. I've got all your email addresses, so I'll send that out. We'll make the audio available online. If there's anyone that's worried about anything they've said and doesn't want it, let me know so that I can edit it out. But I don't think there's anything contentious. What I'll do is when I send you out the chat information, you'll have the Folk Fed email address. And if you would like, I've already mentioned, if you'd like to see some more of this happen, and there are lots of ideas that have come out of the chat, I'll get together with Ruth and Zena, because they've been the two drivers that have kind of encouraged Folk Federation to keep going with this and get this going, and seeing basically where we go from here. And we'll try to sort of get some outcomes and some and see what we might be able to do. If anyone, and then of course, if you have any comment, please. I think there's been some really interesting things. So I noticed some people don't agree with everything, but that's fine. We don't all have to fall over and be in the same box. That's what the value of conversation is, that we learn and see what other people are bringing to the table. So look, thank you all for being part of it, particularly to our speakers, to Craig, to Kimberly, to Val, to Erin, to Keith from FAA, and I would urge you, if you're interested, please get along to their AGM and see what you can contribute as part of that organisation, because I think it is really important that we have an FAA, and hopefully that they can further some of our pursuits. And thank you also to Ruth. I think some of the conversation there was excellent, and to Zena, and also to everybody who put up their hand to add their ideas and things, and we will have a record of all that. So we'll try and distill it somehow. And if you think that these forums, I noticed that some people have said, smaller working groups. So if you think that's a goer, then I'm certainly happy to help facilitate anything that supports our folk sector, because it's a great community of people who have so much to offer. And again, thank you all. So I think we might call it a day.